You want me to do the theme music right now?
Yeah, you used to have a song that used
Everyday Detox with Mike Perrine.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, I sit down with one of my oldest, dearest friends, Chef Peter Cervoni, and we met 20 years ago at Angelica Kitchen in 1997, where I used to work as a pastry chef. So some of you may or may not know that I used to be a natural food chef before I got into holistic health work. I've been a consultant for the natural foods industry, and Peter and I are not only very good friends with a long history, but we're also professional colleagues because we've worked on a lot of these projects and a lot of these restaurants together. So we met at Angelica Kitchen in 1997, and in this podcast, we may have been a little bit too indulgent into the stories from the old days and the early days. And I have to work on this, but like I noticed that sometimes when I have people on that I've known a very long time, I'll talk about places and things that are very specific to New York City in my life, and the listeners may have no idea who or what we're talking about, but I hope this is interesting. We talk about the changing landscape of the natural food industry and the restaurant scene. And anyway, this conversation is a lot of fun, and I am so busy these days. I have a hard time really spending time with my friends and people close to me. So it was great to catch up with Pete. He's one of the warmest, most amazing human beings, and I think you guys will like it. Let's jump right in. And yeah, we're going to get into some stuff, my man. Welcome. It's been, 4 years, and I've been asking you to come on, and here we are.
Yes, and I do apologize for not doing it sooner, and I will be full disclosure. One of the reasons I decided to do this is that you've been so busy lately, is that I knew that if we did the podcast that we would be able to speak for an hour uninterrupted.
Yeah, we might be able to speak
So
longer
that's
than
how
that.
that's how busy you've been lately.
Well,
Just-
you were supposed to be on the podcast with Leslie. I think it was
Right, with
I
Leslie
think,
and Scott.
Yeah, Angelica Kitchen was podcast number 8. Leslie McKieran, the owner of Angelica, and for those that don't know, Angelica has closed almost just under a year ago now.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons why, but Angelica has closed, and
We'll
it's
get into that.
very sad. They're open for 40 years. In the East Village of Manhattan. But I did a whole podcast on the history of Angelica, which is fascinating. And Scott, who is also one of our colleagues, was on
Right.
that. And you were supposed to come that day, but I think you couldn't get down for some reason. You weren't
Right.
feeling well or something. But that's where we met. Angelica Kitchen, if you're interested, watch that podcast or listen to it, because it was one of the coolest, most iconic places in the vegetarian, vegan, organic world. Totally set trends, is responsible for a lot of the food that we have today, because people like Scott, who's working with Matthew Kenny, and like there's other chefs that have come from there. Mississippi Vegan, who does a lot of great food work and food photography and social media work. He used to work there. Like, I grew up there. I feel like I grew up there.
Same here in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, and I was in my 30s.
Yeah, I got super nostalgic about that place, and we had our ups and downs with that place.
Oh
you
yeah,
know?
absolutely.
Can I tell you where the ball got dropped tremendously?
Tell me.
Really think this is such a lost. I think this opportunity is so lost. I think it's one of my best ideas. Angelica had a following.
Mm-hmm.
Angelica had its monumental corner space. Enormous rent with the
Right.
changing times. Okay, this is where an investor could have come in and picked it up. You take a space about the size of. You take a space about a third or a quarter of the size of Angelica Kitchen. Okay, so how many seats does Angelica seat? 40 something, 45?
I think 40.
Yeah.
42.
You
or
okay,
something
Nick?
like that.
Nick just like tripped into the lights. So it seats like 45, about 45 people. You bring it down to a smaller space in the East Village. You name the new location Dragon Bowl, and you just feature Angelica classics. No specials, no nothing.
Right.
Just feature Angelica classics. I think that would have been great. A nice $3,000 a month, little location.
Because those spaces were available.
Yeah. Oh, Dragon Bowl, by the way, is the name of one of the iconic dishes from Angelica. That's like steamed rice and steamed tofu. It's like very basic macrobiotic, but that's what
Right.
everybody loved about it.
Absolutely.
It's like this thing that you just remember from the 90s, and probably some people remembered it from the 80s, but I was not vegan back then, or going to restaurants back then. But from the 90s and 2000s, it's the Dragon Bowl. They
Right.
just called the
You
place
never
Dragon Bowl.
told me that. I think that's a great idea.
Oh, and I never mentioned
No,
that
you
too?
never pitched that. I think
All the
I,
classics, those wonderful sandwiches, those tempeh Reubens, and just those, like, you just take 10 to 15 items. You don't take that whole Angelica menu. You don't do
Right.
daily specials. You don't need it. And you just offer those. I think they would be a thriving business right now.
I think so, and it still could be done. I mean, it just obviously with not with Angelica stuff, but it's interesting when we were doing back when we were working for Peter Burley, who was an absolute inspiration for both of us. Those specials meant something. It was like it. I mean, for lack of a better word, it was cutting edge back then, and it was a lot of fun doing that stuff. I think at some point, because they really never had a chef presence in there. I mean, Amy Chaplin was in there for a while and did an amazing job, but they kind of held her back a little bit too.
Meaning it was concept driven and not chef driven.
Right.
Like, so
Right, so it's
when we
just like
think
you
of
have to
certain
do these-
restaurants, yeah, you think of the chef and their guiding principles around
Right.
food versus the restaurant's principles.
Right. So there was very clear like guidelines on what the specials had to be, and I think at some point it became an albatross for a chef. Like when I thought about coming back 2 years ago, I was like, I've got to do these specials again. I was like, let's just clean up the menu and try new things.
Well, that's the thing too. Like, so, and I think this is one of the reasons why, the Angelica became less popular. Even though, God, when they announced they were closing, they were packed every night.
It's true.
But
a little too.
But I think a lot of people liked the idea of Angelica Kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my whole thing changed. Like, I was not a patron that often, and
Right.
even though I
Same
loved
here.
it, because I don't eat a lot of cooked food. I don't eat the Angelica food anymore.
Right.
But that's my whole. I went off in this other direction with a primarily raw food approach, and I eat much more simply. But I think a lot of people still love the idea of it, so it was very sad for them closing. But there used to be rules around preparing health food. Now there's no rules. Now it's just fucking whatever you want. It's like, well, it has to be vegan.
Right.
I'm talking about in like the natural food world or the vegan world or the So so if we're talking about vegan cuisine, and Angelica was a vegan restaurant, so it has to be vegan, and gluten free is like a good parameter. But what goes into the ingredients is like, I mean, we have vegan hipster donut shops now.
Right.
And I remember when we used to work there, like you had a certain choice. And when I studied at the Natural Gourmet Institute for Food and Health, when I went to culinary school, health food, like there was rules and there was parameters. It wasn't
Right.
just like do whatever the fuck you want to make it vegan. And now they do that.
Right. And I think, I thought about this not too long ago as far as, and I just read it, it's actually higher than I thought it was. Supposedly now the number is 6% of the U.S. population calls themselves vegan or vegetarian.
That's huge.
6%. Whereas when we first you've been vegan a little bit longer than I have, but let's call it 20 years ago, the
Right.
number was something like 2%. So it's still not where we'd like it to be. We'd like to see 50% of the population, and maybe someday it'll get there or more. But 6%, and I think a huge reason for that entry, that influx, that huge number that for to cause it to spike, is a lot of people coming in who are very focused on the animal rights aspect of it and just want fun food. So that kind of I think in the beginning, vegan and health food were kind of on the same path.
They were together. Yeah.
They were together. They were one and the same.
Yeah, the only vegan recipes you would find would be in the back of books. I used to make, John Robbins had a book called May All Be Fed. And I remember I used to make like these orange poppy seed muffins out of it. And like, it was all whole grain and it was like
Right.
maple syrup and like everything was always, that was like the only place you would find this cuisine.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the only place people that were into animal rights would find this cuisine too.
true.
Because you were right. They were side by side. And
Right.
then they just kind of went,
Diverged.
there's animal rights people, and then there's like the health food, cleansing raw food, or fitness people. So, and sometimes they mix and match, but a lot
Right.
of the time, but there is a very separate thing. You have
true.
you have a lot of vegans that are like, look, I want pizza and donuts, but I don't want to hurt animals.
Right.
Which is admirable too.
It is.
know.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's all good. It's still, I mean, we've had this conversation before in terms of like when I started adding more busy food back into my diet, and I would get down on myself and you'd be like, dude, it's still vegan. Like no animals were killed. And I'm like, you're right. At the end of the day, it's all good. The movement is still growing. But I think that's one of the reasons why the whole raw food thing has kind of just plateaued and forget about plateaued. I think it's number of cooked food vegan restaurants are increasing.
Yeah.
And the raw food restaurants are either not opening or closing. Quintessence is still packed for the most part.
I went there last night. Quintessence is a raw food restaurant in New York. It's one of the first ones. Is it? Well, no, there was a couple of like weird little ones that
It was
failed
the first
very quickly.
successful right.
one.
And I had the pleasure of working there for almost a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Quintessence, yeah, hey, listen, fucking, just say, I don't know, I feel like we're hanging out, so I'm just going to tell everybody.
Right, absolutely.
So Pete used to work at Quintessence, and
Well, I don't know where you're going with this, but
yeah,
let it rip.
I wasn't gonna say nothing about you working out there,
Right.
but Pete was the head chef at Quintessence for a while, especially when raw food was like at its peak. They still have one location. They had 3. They had to close 2.
Right.
One of the owners, who's no longer an owner, but he was one of the founders, he got caught several times jerking off in front of women on the subway. So, they got so everything kind of got fucked up with that restaurant. There's no, and we'll talk about Pure Food and Wine in a minute, but there's no lack of weirdness that goes on in the health food world. I'll tell you that, at least not in New York City. There was another restaurant. It was one of my favorite restaurants. Angelica Kitchen and Pure Food and Wine were my favorite restaurants
Absolutely.
in New York of all time. Pure Food and Wine, the greatest thing about them closing was my bank account. I mean, like I just would just screw myself when I
Right.
go there. But they'd make raw food, and they'd make clean raw food, and they'd make really, really evolved, like high-end raw food. So a lot of
Right.
celebrities would go there. Paul McCartney had been there.
Oh, yeah. You name it.
What's his name? Was friends with her too. Used to go. Alec Baldwin, Woody Harrelson. So a lot of people would go to this restaurant. You'd walk in there, you'd see a crowd that was not. They were not the same people that were at all the funky health food restaurants
Right.
around the city. There was this clientele of customers that were like people I had never seen before.
Right, it's true.
They did a great job. More raw food chef restaurant weirdness. If anybody doesn't know, there's a great Vanity Fair article on this. Sarma had this weird thing happen where she got involved in some man. She was the owner of that restaurant, and some shit went down where they stole a bunch of money from investors, and
$2 million.
yeah, $2 million they got from the investors. They went on the run, and then her husband decided to use her credit card to order a Domino's pizza, and
That's how they got
set off the alarms, and they got them, and they arrested them.
Yeah.
And anyway, that restaurant closed because of that, and I don't know, I won't get into all the details of that. I don't want to talk shit
See,
about
that's one of the things about being in this business for 20 years is that I kind of know where all the bodies are buried, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? So
There's
it's like,
it's got to be the whole world, but in this world of like health food and wellness, there's so much weird shit that goes on.
well, part of it was my problem. Like when I first became vegan, my naivete was like, oh, like I'm coming. It came from a very spiritual, a spiritual place.
Yeah, mine too.
And right, and another thing that I'd like to mention, if we're going to put it on permanent record here, is my seat going down? Did it go down?
Probably.
Felt
What is,
myself-
we use these drum stools in the treatment rooms.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Okay, good.
So they've been used a lot, and they start
Right, so
to,
they
to,
start
to go down.
Is that you were my first vegan friend, but you were also my first conscious friend. Like I had always for years, maybe 10 years prior to becoming vegan, always was looking for that, like having a real relationship with my buddies. You know what I'm saying? Like not just like going out and drinking and having a very superficial relationship. So I was blessed to meet people like you and others when I first became vegan, and we were all coming from a lot of integrity. We were all very sane. We had one foot in the vegan health world. We also had one foot that was very, in the regular world, pragmatic and still, great sense of humor and relatable. And I just assumed that everyone in the vegan movement was going to be that way. Not realizing like, okay, and it's happening even more now as the numbers increase, but it's like, okay, you have 2% of the population, but within that population, you are going to have your sociopaths, your sexual deviants, your shysters, you're going to have all that, why I thought it would be any different that's on me.
It's
I was screwed over in a few business relationships with people that I thought were like, wow, this person's vegan, like I'm safe here. Like they're going to stick to their word, and their word is their bond, and we're both vegan, and we're doing this for the animals, and that's not always the case.
You make the assumption that if someone's choosing to eat a certain way, they're thoughtful about things. If
Right.
they like, I don't want to eat food with poison on it. I don't want other creatures to suffer. You feel like they're going to like treat you in a very thoughtful, aware way. Now everybody's human.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. So, but you are right though in the sense that we might even have more bizarreness in our circles.
Yeah.
You know. So, but it's been an interesting ride. But I love how it's evolved. And doing the podcast, you know, I've kind of, and even on social media too, I've kind of held back a lot in that respect. And in fact, so I forgot who it was not too long ago when I said, you know, I did this, like I was working as a vegan chef 10 years before social media really kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
And someone kind of said jokingly, but in a way it's kind of true. It's like, well, that means it never happened. You know, like if it wasn't on social media, it didn't happen. You know, like the whole perception is reality kind of thing. And when social media first started, you know, picking up, I was a little angry and almost resentful of people who were not chefs, who didn't quote unquote pay their dues, but were establishing this internet presence. And it was like, well, wait, you really haven't done anything. What are you doing? You're creating video content. But now that I've seen, like, let's say 10 years have gone by, I see all the good it's done. So even though maybe some of them still haven't worked in a restaurant, maybe some of them have never made food for more than, you know, some dinner guests, you know, these people have tens of thousands of followers and are inspiring others to become vegan. And I think at the end of the day,
getting hired. This was I think the issue you were having too, was like, and they'd be hired by that celebrity to be their chef.
right?
And it's like, wait a second.
Wait,
I went to culinary school. I've been doing this for 15 years, working in restaurants, developing food products. And this 22-year-old kid just took really pretty pictures with his phone, and now he's getting hired by, I don't know.
Right.
I'm making this up, but like,
no, but it's true. I did lose some work over the years by people who've had just really good you know, social media accounts, and that's on me as well. You know, like that's something that I could certainly improve on. But I've come to the realization that whatever it takes. So it's like you have people who are still in the trenches, like my buddies Chad and Derek Sarno, who are constantly in the trenches. Scott, and Matthew are just opening restaurant after restaurant. You have those people who are like constantly cranking day in and day out. And then you have the people working the social media aspect and people doing the, you know, the health aspect. And I think that's the reason why the numbers have spiked so much. And I think it's amazing. It's been, you know.
yeah, people, when they look at their Instagram and stuff, what they're looking for is that when they're choosing what they want to see in their feed, they're choosing things that are going to give them a certain feeling.
Right.
So the people with pretty pictures, they want to eat healthy, so they want it in their mind, like, you know, I want to eat healthy. So
Right.
sorry. I'll edit.
I'm glad we could do all this. I was not sure like how the proper podcast protocol.
But, you know, people, that's what they're choosing. So, you know, it no longer matters how much experience we have.
It's true.
You know, because nobody sees the experience. They just want to see what kind of content you're creating and how it makes them feel,
right,
or what kind of value it gives them.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the world we live in now, which
It
creates
is. You're only as good as your last post.
and it creates more work, unfortunately, but it creates more opportunity. So it's
Right.
more opportunity, but it's more work.
Right.
Because now you got to do it all. Even these podcasts, people, and I'm so happy that, like, I gotten so many messages and comments left, and people are like, do another podcast, bring Gil back, let's get more of this. We'd love to have you back. In that time that I took the 2 years off, and I'm thinking, there's so much work that goes into this.
Right.
You know, it's like, that's why I'm not doing it. Like, that's why it's not really just a decision of like, oh yeah, I'll do one or I won't. It's like, I really got to find the time to do this. And luckily, because of this gentleman over here, who you can't see, or maybe I'll take a video of so we can put him on there. But because of Nick, who's a brilliant operations manager for Vitality, is able to take care of Vitality.
And just hanging out with you, it's like I've seen how much work goes into it. See, that was also another misconception of mine. Is like, you know, I have Instagram, I have Facebook. Doesn't take much to put up a post, but if you're doing it and really doing it as a business, it's a lot of work.
And if you want it to be good.
Right, exactly.
You know, we took a picture the other day, Nick and I came back 2 hours later after having taken the train somewhere and like done some meetings or whatever. And I was like, messing with the picture, and I was like, no, it's not it. This, you know, it's like, Nick,
Right.
we're gonna take this again, you know. And he you know, Nick's a photographer, he gets it, so he was just like, yeah, that's, you know, take it again. I mean, this is for one post.
Right.
This is
It's
for
true.
One post.
It's very cool.
Sometimes I'll take my whole commute in the morning and rewrite something 15 times because I mean, my philosophy is I don't want to overthink it because sometimes I could really end up screwing myself and things never get out the door. But I also, if we're going to do it, let's make it as good as we can make it.
But you're also a perfectionist.
Try to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
try
just
to be.
everything
I mean,
about everything about this business too. Everything, even when we were 20 years ago, when you were making desserts, they were always perfect. You always took the extra time to fold the parchment perfectly and everything. And it shows.
matters. We
It
have
matters.
a
It
thing
does.
here. It's you know, and this Scott really taught me about this too when he worked at Noma. You know, about kitchen tape. You know how they, you know, but they cut the tape.
Right.
It's not about right or wrong or whatever. It's about effort. So here we fold all the toilet paper in the rooms.
Right.
It doesn't matter if the staff uses it. It's always set up for the client. And I told them, and everyone's, there's a couple of therapists that were like, we're going to do this every time for you. It's fold the toilet paper. And I was like, that's my kitchen tape. Like, it shows the person that we take time to set this up for you.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I'm a little ambivalent about that. I mean, I've done it myself, and I've asked, you know, when I taught out there in Venice, you know, that's what we taught. And I did find an easier way. Like, you know, you just get a tape dispenser and it just, you know, you just tear it off and it comes out perfectly every time.
Why aren't there 4 and 6 inch tape strips already for restaurants? Or
It's not
why
a bad
doesn't
idea.
somebody take the roll of tape and take a knife and just clip it in 3 spots so that you can just pull it
Just
off?
pull it off. It's a good point.
Yeah. You're welcome, Chef World. No,
Done.
I'm sure somebody already does that. It's my second brilliant idea. Dragon Bowl and 6
Dragon
inch
Ball
tape.
and 6-inch tape. Yeah, so there's part of me that I understand where it's coming from and I respect it, but there's also I've also been in kitchen situations where it's just like put it on, you know, it's different, I think, where you're folding the toilet paper and the way you fold towels and everything is because the customer is touching it. It's a tactile thing, the customer's seeing it. Customers are not seeing the kitchen tape. I get that, you know. I mean, I get it, you know, and I understand Chef Redzepi's from Noma. I understand his reason for doing it, but I've also been in a lot of other situations where it's like, yeah, that's good, you know, put the tape on it, date it, get it in the fridge, you know, like more of a pragmatic thing.
That's one of the reasons why, like, if you look at the pinnacle of that, like it's totally over dramatized, but the Gordon Ramsay shows. But the reason chefs are known as being temperamental is because kitchen crews are at a battle for time,
Right.
and there's a lot of people that are not naturally organized,
Right.
and they're not naturally good with time. So, like, keeping things tight helps.
Right.
And it was probably some chef that was trying to control 20 people and get his work day and was just sick of seeing this, you know, like just sloppiness. Like,
Right,
you know?
that's true.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
but time management, and we were discussing it earlier when you guys were getting all the microphones and stuff ready, is mise en place.
Yeah.
It's a
We got our
French
batteries in front of the cameras.
French term, everything in its place, and it came out of the kitchen brigade system in France, and but you know what I would teach my students is like it applies to everything in life. So just like now doing a podcast, do you have extra batteries? Do you have the microphone stand? Do you have everything in its place ready to go? Otherwise you have to keep stopping stuff, you know, stop the tape, do this again. So
I'll tell you, man, I feel like, so there's a big difference between, and I'm so much more relaxed in this podcast, but the last two, the ones I did before this was hard because I'm so used to doing that, to organizing. Like, so when I did the first 20 podcast episodes, I had just sold my previous business. I was doing a very limited amount of appointments. I took some time because I had worked really hard for a good 8 to 10 years in that business. And so, you know, I was working a part-time schedule, and I took the time to build that whole web platform and podcast. And I used to prepare for them. And my whole day would be, the whole night before would be setting up for a podcast, getting my head together around it. Then the person would come and I'd have it all set up. And, you know, that was my day. And then they'd break it down. I couldn't wait to get editing. I'd do that for a day. You know, I had plenty of time to do it. This business of like, oh, we're going to work 12 hours and then, you know, do that for 6 days in a row. And then on the 7th day after working another 12 hours, you know, we're just going to, let's do a podcast. Like, it's
Why
just,
not?
I feel dull. I don't read books anymore.
Right.
You know, like I don't feel dull in this conversation, but
Plus,
I'm
full disclosure, we did not prepare for this.
nothing.
I was just like, what are we going to talk about? Just wing it.
Wing it. We got a lot of stuff to cover.
Right.
And I hadn't seen you for a long time. Tell me about that company you're working for now. You doing like some type of seafood?
Yes. The name of the company is called Good Catch. It was started by my friend Chad Sarno, who you know as well. Chad and I have been working together for about 11 years now. And
Chad's good peeps.
yeah,
He makes good food. I don't know his brother, but I've seen the food that he makes.
Derek
and,
is,
they're a power team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of just, a side thing, just speaking about social media, they started Wicked Healthy, which was their website, pretty much just for like shits and giggles, like because they're from the Northeast, Massachusetts area, so like everything is wicked this, wicked that. So they started it. They weren't even putting that much content in, but that now has become. It's going to spawn, and I've seen the galley, amazing cookbook. It's not even a cookbook. It's a tome. It's massive, amazing recipes, amazing photography. And through that, Derek is now pretty much doing all the plant-based food for Tesco, which is in London, which is the largest supermarket in the world. So Tesco has committed to doing vegan food in all of their supermarkets. It's insane. He's going to be the next Jamie Oliver. Derek is.
So let me ask you something. This is something, and I'm not trying to be a purist about this. I'm just wondering because, for the most part, is it important? Like, let's talk about Good Catch.
Mm-hmm.
Are they're a vegan company?
Yes.
Are they a purely owned vegan company? Do they have any, so what's happened? Who was that company? Who was that company recently? It's a product I don't buy. I don't buy any food products. I don't buy none of them. So I'm not familiar with them. But there was some field roast.
Okay.
I had friends that were posting things on Instagram that were like, "Oh yeah, well, like fuck you, field roast," because I guess they sold out to
another.
I don't remember who they sold out to, and everyone's upset suddenly. And I'm wondering, like, the psychology of it. I put a post up on Facebook, and people were having a hard time with it, where Wendy's added a vegan burger.
Right.
The vegan burger. And
White Castle did too.
It was White Castle. I think it was White Castle.
Right,
yeah,
right.
White Castle adds a vegan burger to the menu. And I basically just put this post up, and I said, listen, everyone's like high-fiving each other. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm like, well, first of all, fast food, whether it's vegan or not, is fucking shit, and you need to raise your standards. But that wasn't my point of the thing. But my point about it was that all of the people that were giving me shit about this post were like ethical vegetarians, ethical vegans, and White Castle comes out with a burger. Everybody's high-fiving each other, and I'm like, they want your money. That's all they want.
Right.
They're not. It's not like. Do you remember when we thought the world was changing?
Right.
I did. Like Whole Foods were popping up, and
right.
And I was like, the whole world's going to be a vegan wonderland. And all the animals are going to be safe. And I think that's what happens when people see like a fast food company add a vegan option. They're like, we're winning, and I'm like, are we winning? Or are they recognizing a certain demographic and wanting to go after that revenue stream, and they want your money too? So I'm just curious. I
would say that the two do not have to be mutually exclusive. Yes, I mean, listen, all this influx of money over the last maybe 5 years, with like Bill Gates money coming into the fray. I mean, obviously they see that there's a need for it and there's a demand and that there's a market for it. And like we were always taught back in the day, it's like you vote with your dollars. So it's like, Whole Foods is keeping track of all the sales that go in there. If you consistently buy organic food and you're consistently buying vegan prepared food, they're going to take notice of that. So I think on some levels, the high fives are okay because yes, we are winning.
The market dictates everything.
Right.
You vote with your dollars.
Right. So we are winning. But in the sense of like, and we'll get to the original question about the money behind Good Catch. Yes, the White Castle and these other people that are trying to get into it, they're doing it for a buck. And I think part of the thing is like with the field roast thing, when they sold to, and I forgot who they sold to as well, but they sold to a much larger food company that's not vegan. Are they going to uphold the same standards? You know, are they going to keep true to the field roast vision, or are they going to bastardize it some way? Are they going, you know, just like when the United States government back in, I remember, Leslie was fighting very hard against this when the USDA was taking over the term organic.
I remember the farmers at the Union Square Farmers Market would have, like, you know, previously organic, you know, previously known as
because their
organic.
standards were much higher.
Yeah, their standards were higher.
We just want to make sure that if a business is going to get involved with it, that they keep it, you know. And the other thing too, for all we know, is that they are positioning themselves, or starting to position themselves, or doing a test market to see, will it fly? Maybe at some point it's all going to be veggie burgers, and they're going to pull back on the other stuff. It's possible. Mm-hmm. As far as Good Catch is concerned, just a little bit of history. It's a company my friend Chad Sarno started, and it was very interesting. It was like, as soon as I heard him, as soon as he told me about it, I was like, it's genius. Everyone in the vegan prepared food business has been going after the meat analogs. Oh, it looks and tastes like chicken. Oh, it's a veggie burger, Impossible Burger. Oh, it bleeds like a burger. You have all these different kinds of cheeses. Yeah, now we have cheese that stretches. We have, God knows how. I mean, there's more milk substitutes than there is milk on the shelves now these days.
That the milk industry is actually trying to, like, sue these companies for using the term
milk.
Yeah,
I was actually down in D.C. With the Plant-Based Food Association. We were petitioning against the Dairy Council. The Dairy Council is trying to push this thing through called the Dairy Pride Bill, which basically says that you cannot call anything milk, yogurt, cheese, anything having to do with dairy, butter. You can't use any of these terms anymore unless it's actually from animal products. So some people might say, well, that's kind of silly, and I doubt it's actually going to pass. But that's something where I think we can high-five each other, because that means we're winning. Yeah, if the Dairy Council feels the need, like they're feeling the pressure. They're feeling the pressure now that, like, almond milk and soy milk are cutting into their sales.
There was something with mayo too, right? Mayonnaise. I forgot the company. Yeah.
Well, Hellmann's.
Hellmann's, right.
But now I find out that Hellmann's actually has a vegan mayonnaise now. And at the Plant-Based Food Association, Unilever is also a member now. So, like, this multinational corporation's making everything from, like, dish soap to Hellmann's mayonnaise. Now they're getting involved in the Plant-Based Food Association. So I still think we have to, you know, especially related to our comment earlier about having integrity in the vegan world, I think we still need to keep an eye on these people just to make sure that they're not in it just for the buck, and that they are going to do more plant-based stuff. So, but as far as Good Catch is concerned, Chad was like, no one's looking at seafood. And what I was unaware of, and I'm pretty sure these facts are correct, 95% of the animals that we kill for human consumption come from the sea. So that means all the billions of chickens and pigs and cows and lamb and all this other stuff that we kill on a yearly basis, it's 5% of the total.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And you know what's crazy too? Like, okay, so with the 5% that we're killing, which is an enormous volume of animals, it's very controlled, meaning, like, we're going to put them all over here and kill them in this awful place.
Right.
But it's not like, you know, they're like tearing down the forest to, like, whip all the deers out. And, like, you know, in the ocean, they just, like, drop nets and
mile long.
What they call dredge?
Dredging,
fishing or dredging. Yeah. They just, like, rip the coral reefs up and drag these nets. You know what I found out? I don't know where I heard this. I might have heard this on the Joe Rogan podcast. They what they do with these nets, they're only good for a few uses, and they're huge. They're too big. So when they're
some
done,
of them are a mile long.
So when they're done, they cut them
and just let them out to sea.
Just let them out.
So just everything else is getting caught up into it. And
how many of those a day are they doing?
Right.
I mean, because basically, so the crazy part is they're going out into nature and just
pulling everything up.
Harvesting out of it. It's fucking anything.
Right.
You know, where it's awful what goes on in the cattle farms, but at least it's not like they're like
they're
dredging a forest, you know, or mountain range.
Right. Like, that's a good point. Although, I mean, all the clear cutting that goes on in the Brazilian rainforest to provide for grazing. So it is kind of a similar situation. So Chad came up with this ingenious idea to come up with a tuna-based substitute. So and we have this amazing food scientist, and that's where a lot of the magic came in. It's a product that looks and tastes just like tuna from the can.
Tofu and celery?
No,
I'm kidding.
No,
that's very 1991.
Right, the old school was like
kidding.
Mashed chickpeas and you could. In fact, when I used to teach people how to make really good hummus, I would, and this is long before I even became vegan, I would tell them, You know it's perfect when you have the right amount of lemon juice and garlic and tahini and olive oil, that it tastes like tuna fish. That's, to me, like that was always like the perfect hummus. So no, it's made from 6 different beans. They use algae oil to provide the DHA and a little bit of the fishiness, and it's absolutely amazing. The good thing is that if I'm not mistaken, 100% of the money that's in there now are all from vegan companies. So yeah, so I'm very excited about the product, and I've been involved in I've seen the manufacturing process, and I have to say that it's a very clean product. Not clean by your standards. It's still a processed food.
That's where I am a purist. I'll never eat.
Right.
I'll never eat that product.
You'll never eat it, right?
But
But I also look at it this way too. We're really not marketing this for vegans. I mean, the vegans are going to eat it regardless because it's really tasty. And it is also very healthy. That was the other thing too. Not only did it have to look and taste like it, but it had to have the same nutritional profile as tuna. So when we do these trade shows and people just come up and start eating the food, it's like, if you could have something that looked and tasted like tuna and had the same nutritional profile, the same protein, the same, the omega-3 fatty acids, would you still want to eat tuna? And a majority of the people say no.
I like about the Good Catch stuff. When you told me you were going to work with that company, I looked online at the ingredients, or you told me what they were or something like that. And even though it's a processed food, it's a lot less processed than the other stuff.
Right.
All of our vegan friends are going crazy about this Impossible Burger.
Right.
Yeah, it was absolutely impossible that I would ever put that in my mouth. I mean, that
I have had it, and it's good. It would blow you away. The flavor is just like, yeah.
Dude, you ever do like, you ever mix like Old English 800 and cocaine? Like that'll blow you away, dude. That'll blow you away.
Good, man.
Yeah, that'll blow
I never
you
did
away.
malt liquor. We always have this conversation. I'm like, see, that's why, because I didn't grow up in Staten Island. I was born. I got out of there the first year.
I didn't realize I was a statistic. We'll get to that in a second. But my point was that like that shit was so. When I saw the ingredients on Impossible Burger, I was like, and this concerns me because I feel like a lot of the vegan food. I mean, we talked about the big departure from the early days of like with health food and vegan food being intertwined and now being separate. There's a couple of major mistakes that I think vegans are making, and one thing that's not a mistake is we care about animals and we have more compassionate hearts and minds, and like that's great.
Right.
But what concerns me though is when we're refined. Well, let me put it this way: refined carbohydrates, high omega-6 containing processed oils, and a lot of the food additives that are in the vegan natural foods, and also the gluten-free products that are basically taking something like whole grains, which are at least a plant, and they're putting like all these combinations of glues and starches together to make bread. They're exceptionally unhealthy.
Right.
And I think in the long term, you're going to see you're going to see veganism lose its credibility because the majority of people doing it are not eating real food.
It's a good point. And we've had this conversation before. I've struggled for the last 10 years with my health. Before my diet changed, and I'm still trying to figure out what the key points were. Maybe that's a subject for another time. I have that MTHFR thing with the B12 problems, methylation. But I have experienced since that time when my health started to slip, my diet did change, and I started to. Some of the reasons were I craved that food from those analog products. Part of it was laziness too, but my health in some respects has taken a hit from eating a lot of these processed foods. And I share that same concern, is that while we're trying to hopefully get more people to transition to this way of life and like drop the meat, and you're not going to necessarily do it by saying like, oh, here's a bowl of brown rice. I mean, ultimately that would be great if we could do that. Like if everyone would just come over for Dragon Bowls and leave it at that. That would be fantastic. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And even myself, have experienced issues where it's like, I like those foods.
Everybody does, though.
Right.
That's everybody's relationship to that food, because there's 3 things really that people have going against them when it comes to this. One is those foods are based on our intrinsic reward system. We seek out fat, sugar, and salt.
Right.
In nature, it comes in doses. So we would find it and we'd be stoked. We found that honey. I remember watching a documentary and this guy was getting all stung up by bees. I don't think they had stingers. I think they were biting them or something. Or it wasn't as traumatic as like, a wasp's nest, but the dude was up there. He was a tribesman and there was this National Geographic was with him or something. And they were like, he's determined to get that honey because he's going to bring that back to his woman. You know what I mean?
Right,
so
right,
like,
right.
You want it like, like it would hit us in doses and we'd like get these rewards. And we'd be like, look, I got the goods,
Right.
Or a fruit would come in season and we get a lot of sugar. Or they would, they'd find that they'd hunt that animal down or whatever, and it'd be like, oh no, now we have fats. Like it was always getting us to like look for food and keep us seeking and keep us hungry. And now we have everything we want.
Well, I mean, I forgot who wrote that. The witch doctor had written that book not too long ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, basically talking about how, just like what you said, just a couple of thousand years ago, it was we needed those things and they were in very short supply. They were very hard to work for. Now we have the opposite, where it's like it's abundant. It's everywhere. We have way too much of these things.
Right. Anything we want right now, we can get the most refined, sweet,
absolutely
stuff
anything you
world.
want, anytime you want. Yeah.
Fat, meat, sugar,
right.
refined carbs, which is also like we can have it just like that anytime
right.
we want. We've lost our shit. So we have those pleasure centers in the brain that light up based on that reward system, and so it has a drug-like effect and is an addictive quality.
Absolutely.
Then on top of that, we have the paradigm. We're all brought up in that. Our parents ate this way. We ate
right.
that way. I walked down a breakfast aisle. I was looking for Larabars. I was in Oregon, and I was like, okay. I was like trying to find a couple of Larabars because I didn't have any food with me, and I wasn't going to be eating dinner for a good few hours. So I was looking at all the different aisles, and one said breakfast foods. And I looked down it, and there were all of these like bars and like cereal things and like sugar snacks, and I was like, wow, who determined that? Like somebody, like if I didn't like, if I wasn't into what I was into, if I and I didn't look at the world the way I do, I'd be looking up at this as like a 14-year-old or a 10-year-old or whatever, and I'd be like, breakfast bars. This is what I eat for breakfast. Go do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like somehow it's like it's we're taught what to do. So we're taught that it's okay.
Right.
So we have a relationship with these foods where these foods are damaging to us. We're addicted to them, but we think it's okay because Dad eats it.
Right.
And then the other thing is the microbiome, which is huge, which I nerd
right.
out on. The bacteria in the gut will tell us what to eat, and whatever we are nourishing there, whatever we're feeding them with, is the population is going to reflect that, and then it's going to tell us to bring more and more and more.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they've done fascinating stuff with that. You change the microbiome, your food cravings change. So it's part of it is breaking the addictive cycle and then thinking outside the box and getting out of your paradigm of what we were raised on and what the rest of the world was doing.
Right.
But then it's changing the microbiome to drop the food cravings out. That's why I crave a big salad every night. If I crave pizza or Subway sandwiches or something, my life would suck. I'd always want something better than what I was getting, and I'd be eating garbage.
Right,
That's why
right.
people think vegan and vegetarian food is rabbit food.
Right.
Because they think that's got to be bland and shitty. But that's because they're so used to their thing.
And that's one of the things that's changed. Is that now it's like, wait, I can get that burger and
right,
and I don't have to sacrifice anything. So
but the question though, and it's this weird line, and I see this doing holistic health work and being a colonic therapist, I had to look at it objectively. I remember when I was a pastry chef, I'd have these interns come in. I had the influence of Dr. Fred Bishy, as did you, from a very early age, from eating clean. So always juicing, always eating salads, always eating whole grains. Yes, I ate tofu cheesecake and muffins and stuff like that. Like, so I had that for the first few years, and that kind of worked against me a little bit, but I was young, so it didn't matter as much. But I always had this basis in fresh, raw food. Like, we always did that. There were vegans that would come into Angelica. They would be my interns, and they'd be eating like those, the things with the flaky pastry, those turnovers and stuff we used to make, and the phyllo wraps.
Oh, yeah, the stuff that we would make. Yeah.
White flour and fat, which was mostly canola oil, and like tofu whip, which was like blended tofu with different fats and sugars and stuff that was technically supposed to be healthier. But because their diet was dominant in that, they were always like heavy, pasty, puffy, and they were like 21 years old.
Right.
And I was like, why doesn't that person look good? Like, he looked like shit.
Right.
And when I started doing colon hydrotherapy, I was working with a variety of people. Some of them were like raw food vegans, and some of them were, they were athletes. that ate some meat. They ate some animal food, but they ate salads, and they would, they would have some brown rice, and they would eat fruits and smoothies, and they would juice, and they were fucking kicking ass beyond the vegans. And I was like, oh shit. So it doesn't matter. Like, vegan doesn't mean anything. Healthy.
No, it's not a panacea, and I'm living proof of it. It's like I've actually had people, especially, because I was never as lean as you, but remember back in the day, I was eating mostly raw. I was juicing. I did 5 40-day juice fasts, and I did a juice fast every year, 40 days for 5 years in a row. Was very heavily into colonics and cleansing and all that other stuff, and I was doing really well. When my diet changed, I started putting weight on, but I actually had people, some of them we know, that actually insinuated that I was no longer vegan. And I was like, no, I have not been.
Why? Because you had put weight on or something?
Yes, because I put weight on.
Yeah.
And it was difficult to, to experience that. But I mean, I'm proof of that concept that you just said, is that it's not a panacea, and there's healthier ways of doing vegan and unhealthy ways of doing vegan. And I could certainly do less of the processed food.
What a lot of people don't get, Dr. Michael Greger came out with this great video where he talked about why vegans were suffering heart attacks before people that would eat meat. Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendy's, lived longer than, I don't remember, I might be messing up the organization, but it was like the American Vegan Association or something. Like the president
I didn't know that.
Of that company. Yeah, and he died of a heart attack. This gentleman that was the head of the American Vegan Association. I don't think that's the real name of it. Whatever the organization was, it was one of those vegan organizations. And it was because Dr. Greger was like, okay, I got to figure this out, because you know who he is?
Yeah, of course, I've met him.
He's got that weird way of talking.
Yeah.
He's so funny. He's so funny. He's very smart too. So basically what he does is he takes, what is the name of his website? Nutritionfacts.org, I think it is.
Right.
Nutritionfacts.
Yeah, I first met him at Veg Fest.
Oh, you met him?
Yeah. Yeah, and he does this very cool thing, huge auditorium of people, and he does a quiz show. And that's how he gets the information out, which is very cool. Yeah.
He goes through studies and tries to validate why some things work and some things don't work in vegan nutrition world. And so he looked at well, how could this be? So he went into the books, went through all the studies, and was like, okay, but wait, you're eating, if we look at the diets of all of these people, in Asia, we look at this, we look at their incidence of, heart disease are down, but okay, now we're eating vegan, we're eating similar to that, and why aren't ours down, and what he found was that it was the omega-6 fatty acids. It was the canola oil, the sunflower oil, the peanut oil. Yeah, because omega-6 fatty acids, which we need some of them, they're essential fatty acids, they cause inflammation. So they're part of our inflammatory response.
Interesting.
And when you eat fish or algae or krill, or flaxseed, and some chia seed and hemp seed, their omega-3, omega-6 ratios are different. They're a little more equal, or they're not as dramatic. Whereas with some of the other oils I mentioned, and I'm not giving the exact numbers. I don't recall them in my head right now.
Canola is the biggest one, because that's ubiquitous, unfortunately.
Peanut and sunflower, I think, are some of the biggest ones, and
safflower.
They have ratios that could be anywhere from 30 to 40 to 1, and it should be about
omega-6.
Yeah, omega-6 to omega-3. It should be about 50-50.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it should be about 1 to 1. If you get into walnuts, I think it's 6 to 1. Hemp seeds might be 4 to 6 to 1. So it's still a little bit off balance, but it's so much healthier. You get so much more omega-3. Omega-3 reduces inflammation. So it's eating, not only are those oils good for the brain, but they're super important.
Right.
So when I look at the types of fats that people are using in the processed food, I go, oh shit, these vegans are all going to have heart disease.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I still, I get, and Fred has said this too,
Dr.
when he saw me, Dr. Bishi, right, would say, he was concerned with me in the sense of be careful with all this cleansing, because he's like, if you can't stay on this, if you can't stay on the path, and I guess he must have known intuitively, a lot of, emotional eating from breakups with in relationships and stuff like that, that I would fall off the wagon more easily. And he was right, because I think the cleaner I got, the more difficult it became to eat that stuff. Like Fred would say, you can't go backwards. And it's very true. And if that's one caveat I could give the listeners, is that, cleansing is very important, but if you have to really make sure that you're not going to continue to eat processed food.
Yeah. So the thing for people to really take away is that the body believes what you say. right? So so this happened to someone, I won't say who she is. She was a very prominent person in the raw food movement. She had been very overweight. She lost all the weight. She's like super famous, wrote a book. She was doing something called juice feasting.
Mm-hmm.
And juice feasting was something that was popular. I think it was like 2007 or 8, where people would drink juice for 100 days at a time. They drink.
I did a 93.
You did it, yeah. You did one of those. I think you did over 100 ones too, didn't you?
No, that originally was supposed to. I was shooting for 108 for the. And then I was just
number.
like 93, and
For the
it was like
sacred number of
yes.
108. But you got to 93. But that's a long time.
Right.
So the body goes, oh shit, we don't exert any energy into nutrition anymore. We live on fluid, you know?
Yeah.
It just believes what you say. And then you're like, no, we're going to go back to food. So she went back to eating raw food, like regular raw food, like just like the stuff that made her skinny and healthy to begin with. And she started to gain weight back from the fast because, you know, you drop below what your normal weight would be when you're juice fasting. And she started to gain weight back, and then she went over it, and she started gaining excess weight because her body was like, what the fuck do you want me to do with all these calories? We just made everything super efficient, and now you want us to go back and do this. So, you know, your body, you know, it's not like 3-day fast or even a 10-day fast, but when people get like deep into something, or if someone goes into raw food for 2 years and then they're like, fuck it, I want bagels, the body's like, okay, well, we're going to process this like excess. We're going to process it like excess.
Right. It's true.
They're going to put on weight and they're going to start to have problems.
Yeah, that's very true. And I guess I went to the well one too many times as far as like doing the fasting, instead of just doing, you know, one of my goals was to always do, and we did it at Hippocrates, was 1 day a week you fast. They chose a Wednesday. We used to do it at Hippocrates at the Health Institute, but it's like you could choose any day, like a Saturday, Sunday, whatever day, Monday, and you just fast 1 day a week. And that to me makes more sense as far as like resetting your body once a week. The fast I found easy, but I'm kind of an all or nothing guy. I mean, some people I know when I used to do the 40-day fast, they were like, I can't go 40 minutes without eating. And I was like, I'm fine. And then, you know, you experience the euphoria and you start to your body becomes super efficient. You know, I used to make these lists of things to do, and it would just be like I'd be done with a full day's list by noon, you know, and just so much extra energy. And my meditation was deeper. Did you know that was coming at some point?
No, I didn't know it was coming, but that's what that is our nitrogen tanks.
Scared the shit out of me.
So what happened? If you guys noticed changes in audio earlier, it's because our cryosauna had a vent on. Nick, nobody heard it, and then Nick finally realized that the vent was on. And that's why that happened. And then our nitrogen tanks, they outgas. They build up pressure and they outgas, and we have vents that carry that gas out. So anyway, that's just basically outgassed, and it's fucking scared the hell out of everybody. But my man Nick just told me that
got to wrap it up.
Our memory cards are getting full here, and we've been chatting for a good hour and 20 minutes. So,
nice.
Welcome to the world of podcasting.
It's great. Thank you.
Come back. So we're going to get you on to what would be really great is 27's your lucky number. It would be good to have you on for 27. I mean, you come on before that, but if we get you on for number 27.
Yeah, I'd love to, because I think there's like so many other things that we could discuss that we didn't.
Oh, hell yeah.
That we didn't get to, yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. And then it would be great to have you on for number 108. When we get there. All right, man. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, man.